everybody, and how are we all doing today? Hopefully I'm coming through loud and clear because I've made a few adjustments to the microphone setup. How are we all doing today? Happy New Year to you. It is the 4th of January 2026, the first episode of the season. So I got a bit distracted there. Got to ignore things going on over there. And what we're going to be discussing today is what seeds, or is it worth sowing any seeds right now? Before we get into that, let's see if anybody is out there. Ballycillian says, hello, everyone. Just putting dinner on. I'd be listening and joining the chat when finished. Thank you very much. What are you having for dinner? Adrian is there saying, hi, Richard and all. Good evening to you. We have got a Lotted Chef, aka Nathan, saying good evening all. Good evening to you. Rob is there saying good evening, everyone. Good evening to you. Turbo Stream, good evening, Veg Podcasters. Good evening to you. Scott is there saying good evening all. Good evening to you. Kate is there. Good evening, Veg Army. Good evening to you. Anna Jones, evening gardeners. Good evening to you. We have got Gary saying good evening. Good evening to you. Hargrave Gas, evening all. Hope you've had a good week and not too much frost damage. We'll get into that in just a moment, actually. Rob is there saying hi. Good evening to you. Over on Instagram, Dad and Son on allotment has joined. Plot 13A has joined. Darren Bale has joined. Lovely to see you. And Plot 13A says, Happy New Year, Richard. And Happy New Year to you too. Hope you are well. Lovely to see you. We must all catch up soon. Jenny says, hello, everyone. Happy New Year. I hope you are well. We've got Money Boots. Good evening and a happy new grown year. Happy New Year, buddy. I've been meaning to give you a call. Hope you are well. Andrew says, good to see you, Richard and the Veg Army. Good evening to you. Anna Jones says, hi, Rob. What have we got? Graham says, evening, everyone. Happy New Year, all. Digwell, Bună seara, good evening, gardeners in Romanian. I probably did not pronounce that at all very well. Turbo Stream, Happy New Year from a Baltic Birmingham. Snow arrived on Friday and still here. Everything is frozen solid. There's a lot of comments in tonight. Great to see. Great to see. Jenny says, I will be sowing onions, chilies, and aubergines soon. I am mainly sowing some of my companion planting as I need them to be young plants, not plug plants, so they work in the beds straight away. Well, before we get into that, then Nicola also says, hello, Richard and all. Got back in 20 minutes ago, driving through sleet and snow with 6 new chooks. They're in the back of the car till morning in a dog crate. Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. I've actually lost one of my chooks this week. One of my older ones. I'm now down to just my 4 chickens. Well, my 4 chickens that are laying. Anyway. Yeah, how are we all doing? It is Sunday night. It is our time for us to get together. We have a bit of a chat. We see how everyone is doing. And tonight, as I said, I want to talk about, is it too early to sow seeds? Now, many of us gardeners, we're really itching to get sowing as soon as New Year's in. As soon as January comes around, we're like, let's go sow some seeds. Let's get stuck in. Let's do something. And I mean, put your hands up if you are really wanting to sow some seeds. Love to see if you are looking to sow some seeds, because I think most of you are going to be itching to sow lots of seeds. But let's face it, this week has been exceptionally cold. We've had a heavy frost here, which is very rare in my part of the world. We very, very, very rarely get a frost. But this week we have had a really hard frost. The ground is frozen. It is quite a pleasure, actually. But that tells me if we were to sow any seeds outside, they're not going to germinate, are they? It's going to be too cold. Generally, seeds are triggered by heat. Not in all cases, but when they reach the right temperature, that generally triggers them into growth. So when it's cold, they're not likely to germinate. In some cases, the cold can actually help with germination on certain seeds, apple seeds, because they do need a period of cold weather. But we are unlikely to grow any apple trees from seed. We're basing this more on what we would sow. Now, the other side of this is that there is not enough light as well to sow seeds. When a seed germinates, it generally needs two things: heat and light. And if we have too much heat, we could sow seeds indoors, of course, where it is warmer. If they have too much heat and not enough light, you tend to get leggy, long seedlings that are not very strong. So there's a very ratio between the heat and light that we need for our seedlings to be successful. Now, I do have grow lights. I also have heated propagators. So there are some seeds that I start early, and I've started sowing seeds already. But I might be the exception to the rule here. I'd love to know what seeds anybody out there is likely to sow. Anna Jones says, thick snow in the northeast too. Leafy Keith just checking in to say Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you. Lovely to see you. We've got Kate saying, I'll do some aubergine indoors. Nicola's put a thumbs up. Jenny's put a thumbs up. Guilty as charged. I can't help it. Or this is when I said about asking people to put their hands up if they are sowing too many seeds or wanted to sow seeds. Scott has put his hands up. Over on Instagram, Plot 13A has put her hands up. I've sown onions, chilies and aubergines on a heat mat in the windowsill. Turbo Stream, I haven't sown any seeds. We'll probably wait till mid-February now. I don't think that's the wrong thing at all. I think that is probably the right thing to do. Stuart says, evening, Richard and the Veg Army. Sorry I'm late. Lovely to see you, Stuart. Ian is joined. Evening, Richard and all. Money Boots says, -6 tonight in Wolves. -6. That's cold. Digwell says, I am the opposite. I do not want to sow any seeds other than OSGs just yet. OSGs? What's OSGs? Please help me out there. Onion seeds, I guess. Jenny says the milk bottle method is good as it helps them germinate when ready, helps when it's peak snowing time, and so not much going on. I don't use grow lights or heat mats. So this seems like a good opportunity to now to jump in about heated propagators and grow lights. Now, I mentioned a few weeks ago that I have started sowing chili seeds, pepper seeds, and aubergine seeds. And I find that those three, I get the best results with a long growing period. But they are sown in heated propagators and they have grow lights on top of them. And the reason I have that is that gets them off to a good early start. It gives them that long growing season, but it gives them that good early start. The trouble is our summers here are not long enough for chilies and aubergines and peppers. And again, this is where I say when plants get too much heat and not enough light, they get a bit leggy. So those sort of seeds, if I didn't have heated propagators, if I didn't have grow lights, I would wait until the end of this month before I'm sowing them. But things like onions, we're sowing those in our shed. They still need a bit of protection. We have sowing onions. That's our exhibition onions, our spring onions, chives, and also Welsh onions. A bit of a collection of different onions that we can sow, but they need to be sown somewhere on the windowsill, a bit of protection in order to make sure they survive. Jenny says, oh no, I've read that one. Turbo Stream, my neighbour's car slid off his drive and took out the concrete fence post yesterday. Thankfully, it's his fence. It's cold. It's cold. Scott says, I'm going to be sowing onions, shallots, and chilies. As I said, I'm not surprised some of you are wanting to do it. Rob says, I've already sowed my big onions and chilies. Hi, Nigel. Says we weren't going below 1 degree C, then slightly warmer. It is cold. It is cold. About to start chili, says Leafy Keith. Anna Jones says late February or March, the earliest for me. And on a heat mat with grow lights, says Leafy Keith. Yeah, it makes a big difference. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. Heat mats, I do have heated propagators and I've just got some heat mats as well. But the grow lights for me are probably the thing I would invest in more. I would encourage anybody to invest in more. They're not very expensive. They're really not. You can pick them up on Amazon now for sort of a tenner, and that does really help them out in a big way. The one thing, we can control the heat, but we do struggle to control light levels indoors or in the house. I think it sunsets at the moment about 4 o'clock in the evening and rises 7:30, I think. So we've not got a huge amount of sunlight hours. And when we do have those sunlight hours, it's not the bright light that plants really thrive on. So I do find myself really enjoying using grow lights and heat mats. Anyway, Stuart says, I have sown far too much, had heat mat and grow lights for Xmas, so I've got started. Absolutely. Ian says, I have some mustard to sow as 2 lots of microgreens have completely failed. Yeah, microgreens, mustards, they can actually be sown quite easy. Under a bit of protection in a cloche or something, they can actually be done. Nigel says, onions, peppers, celery, aubergines and leeks sometime next week in a heated Vitapod and lights when required. There we go. So again, heated propagators and little grow lights are paying off. Digwell says, it's times like this that you wish you had pot antifreeze in the car. Nigel, sorry, not Nigel, allotted chef Nathan says, chilies, peppers and aubergines going in this week. Fingers crossed. You really are. I'm not surprised, actually. The majority of you are quite eager to sow a lot of your seeds. And I'm with you on that. I am completely with you on that. I mean, and if you've seen a reel I put up yesterday, I do this. Well, last year I did this thing where I got ChatGPT to write a seed plan for the entire year. And although I've done it again for 2026, but I've got Copilot to do it. Just written a seed that I can sow every single day. And I'm following that this year. It's not all I'm sowing because obviously I'm going to sow the things that I would normally want to sow. But this is just something I'm doing, a bit of content basically. And you would see I've already sown some microgreens, pea shoots, and winter purslane, which I'm unsure about the winter purslane, to be honest. But I've described that being sort of around the area of it's tailored to my area, but also where we want it to work. Digwell says, OSG, seed catalogue monorphic for onions, shallot, and garlic. Review, onions, shallot, and garlic. Yeah. Again, onions, shallot, garlic are some that we can sow now. Let's be honest. It's very easy to sit here and say we shouldn't be sowing seeds because it's too cold and there's not enough light. I think what we should be doing more is focusing on what we can sow. So onions, shallots and garlic are great things that we can sow, even without heat propagators. They will need a bit of protection in a cloche or something. Winter purslane, microgreens, herbs on the kitchen windowsill, chives, parsley, coriander, winter lettuce, lamb's lettuce. There's a whole wide range of seeds that we could sow. Over on Instagram, Andy's Garden 24 has joined. Well, lovely to see you. Hope you are well, buddy. Turbo Stream says, no point for me as I have nowhere I can reasonably grow them on. One reason is not worth sowing broad beans till March here. So, Turbo Stream has actually alluded to another point that I wanted to make when it comes to sowing seeds too early. Now, most tomato seeds will tell you can sow tomato seeds in January. And in fact, this tomato plant right here, I sowed in January last year. Still growing well. We're even getting flowers on it, believe it or not. So you can sow them in January is what I was going to say. That variety is a mini bell. It's a dwarf tomato. So it's not going to grow too big. But the trouble I have when we sow tomatoes too early and they're too warm, they've got enough light, they grow big, they grow tall. And by about March, I find myself not having enough space for my tomatoes. Really, if you're going to sow tomatoes in January, you need a heated greenhouse. The trouble is you end up with these tomatoes that are 3-4 foot tall and nowhere to pot them. It's too cold outside. March, you might get away in an unheated greenhouse. You might not. But unless you've got the tools in place, and it's a case that the seedlings can get a little bit too quick. -5 degrees C here tonight. Cold, isn't it? Yeah, it's -2 here at the moment. Digwell says, okay to sow on heat with light, but what do you do when they get to 12 inches tall? Exactly. That is exactly my point with the tomatoes. They get too tall. You've then got to find somewhere to pot them. And then you've got a stress of that, and it becomes quite awkward. Let's face it, it does become quite awkward. Over on Instagram, Crab89 has joined and says, hi, I just bought a heated seed mat and it advised don't use with grow lights as it will burn out the seed. Interesting. I've not heard of that. There are propagators, which I want to get some, the Vitapod. They can actually have the grow lights inside the propagator, in the lid of the propagator. So I find that quite interesting. The old incandescent grow lights, not so much the LED ones, thinking about it, they did throw out a lot of heat. So it could be those. But the LED ones don't throw out anywhere near as much heat. So if you're going to get grow lights, LED is the way to go. Let's just quickly. Nicholas says it was still here at 5:15 around the clouds. Gary says, please, any tips for effective use of grow lights? Yeah. Put them on a timer. I have mine on for 16 hours a day. Get them as close to the plant as you possibly can, because that's going to encourage the plant pull on lots of leaf but stay stocky. Ideally, if you can adjust the height of the light, it will make a big difference. So that's my 2 tips. Get decent ones, get LED ones, pop them on a timer. That's more than 2 tips, I know. And try and get the heat adjustable. Over on Instagram, Andy does say, Happy New Year. I'm really good, thanks. Back to work tomorrow, though. Oh, yeah, I'm not looking forward to that myself. He also says, I will be sowing my chilies, peppers, and aubergines this week. Going to do some onion seeds, leeks, and chives also. But later in the month, try my luck with some perennial kale and cabbage. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Nigel has actually come up with an answer. Digwell said earlier, what do you do when your plants get 12 inches tall, when they're too high for the propagator? And Nigel says you put another layer on the Vitapod. This is one of the reasons I quite like the Vitapod heated propagators. I've got to seriously look at getting some because I think they will make a big difference. They do. Rather than my shelf that I've made, I think they will make a big difference. Jenny says, I sow and germinate indoors. As soon as they have true leaves out, they go to the zippy. Tough love keeps them from going leggy. They grow slow, but strong. Interesting, interesting, interesting. What have we got? Turbo Stream says, I've fallen for the seeds to sow in January trick before. I end up re-sowing later on. This is a risk. It is a risk. So I did ask... I didn't actually ask the question, but I think the question I'm going to ask you now is, what seeds are you sowing? What seeds are you sowing this week and next week? Scott says, we can sow garlic still. Brilliant. I thought I'd missed out on it. No, plenty of time. You can actually sow them as late as March. They do need a period of cold to turn them into cloves, which is a week below 10 degrees C, but plenty of time to do it. The only trouble is your ground might be frozen. That might be a bit of a problem. What have we got? It depends on what lights you have. Digwell says 500 chili seeds to sow in Jiffy 7s in a few weeks. No point sowing if the buyer cannot grow them on. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's where they're going to be, where they're going to go on to is something we have to consider. And again, tomatoes for me are a really good example of why I say think about where they got to go. Tomatoes, they can be sown in January, but they grow too big. And then I mean, I often see people with conservatories, they've got the heating on with hundreds of tomato plants in the conservatories because they've just found out they have nowhere for them to go and it's too cold for them. And I mean, it's great. I think puts the conservatory to use, but it's not practical at the same time. Ian says, I need to sow some broad beans. I've done some on a client's garden and they are all up. Absolutely. Broad beans are actually a good one to sow as well. Again, I would class broad beans, in my opinion, they could probably go straight into the ground thinking about it, but they will germinate slowly. But I would say they probably need a bit of a cloche or something just to protect them a little bit from the worst of the weather. But you can certainly do that. Turbo Stream says, I saw one video where she sowed parsnips in February. Way too early for parsnips. Way too early for parsnips. When it comes to sowing seeds outside, one of the rules I've always thought about, and you might agree or disagree, when it comes to sowing outside, if nothing in the soil is germinating, if the weeds or nothing is growing, it's too cold to sow seeds. Mother Nature is a bit of your friend in that case. You watch and observe and see what it does. Ian says, sow in February as the light levels are better and they soon catch up. Yep, absolutely. That sounds a bit backwards, to be honest, says Rob. What does? The heat mat thingy. Oh, right. Yeah, the heat mat thingy. I don't know if it was the old-fashioned grow lights that did throw out a lot of the heat. I can believe that, but these days with LED ones, no. Nicholas says aubergine and sweet peppers and a mini munch cucumber she's sowing at the moment. Digwell says LEDs throw out mega heat, especially the Mars Hydro. They would fry my seedlings. That's an LED light. I'm touching that with no problems. It's warm to touch, nothing to worry about. I like LEDs anyway. On Instagram, Andy's Garden says, I have a couple of propagators with built-in LED lights. They are good, but I found that the plants grow to the lids quickly. He also says, I've also fallen for the tomato sowing in January and won't be doing that again. End of February for me. Yeah, I'm the same. Turbo Stream says, we'll sow a few onions mid-February and then more in April. Broad beans in mid-March, not sowing before then. Absolutely. Jenny says, this week and next week, I will sow onions, also some perennial and half hardy annuals. I had them to be plants to defend my young crops. My companion planting are my nets. Etc. Alternative. Interesting. Rob says, my spider farm will give off some heat as well. Are they LED lights? I mean, I'm not saying LED lights don't give off any heat. It's just they're dramatically less. Digwell, winter sown broad beans, we've spoken about this before, mature 2 weeks earlier than spring sown with only half the yield. In my experience, not bothering again. We're doing that experiment, actually. We are sowing some broad beans. We've sown some broad beans. We've only got one come up, actually, for overwintering, and we're going to compare it with spring sown ones as well. So we're doing that experiment here at the Veg Grower Podcast. See how it compares. Scott says, can sweet peas be sown now? Again, indoors. Sorry. No, I wouldn't sow him indoors. It might be too warm indoors, but in a cold frame or something like that, then yes. Somewhere cool, but not too hot. What have we got? Turbo Stream says French beans get direct sown mid-May, leeks April's, parsnips mid-April. No, not growing brassicas this year. Yeah, so what are you sowing now? The Mars Hydro is 5 times hotter than SF. Crikey, they sound hot. Muddy Boots, I have 4 times Mars Hydro SP250 LEDs, and they do give a lot of heat off. I've got no experience with these Mars Hydros, but are they as hot? Excuse me. Are they as hot as the old incandescent light bulbs that, when they blew, you had to change them? You had to wait for the bulb to cool down before you could even touch it. Do they get as hot as that? That's my question there. Jenny, or the halogen light bulbs, they were very hot thinking about it. The halogen ones, very, very hot as well. Jenny, we have lupin stays, etc., germinating in the beds. So that's my prompt to start companion plants. As I said before, the milk bottle method. So they sit there and germinate when ready. Excellent, excellent. I had a sunblaster, great light, but well, did it get hot? Ended up throwing it out. Again, it does depend on the type of bulb, but so my LED ones, I can touch those. It's just bit warm to touch, nothing uncomfortable. My cup of coffee is much warmer. Is that a hydro? Is that hydro and Mars hydro? I was not aware that they made them. Need to check again. No, that's not a Mars hydro. That is a West Kent hydroponics. So no, it's an LED light. That's why I was grabbing that one to show as an example. I'm not sewing anything now, says Adrian. Digwell, a good LED lamp will have a heat sink above the unit. Cheap ones have nothing, and all that heat is projected downwards. Again, there's still not a lot of heat with LEDs. That's why a 10-watt bulb was as bright as a 100-watt bulb, because the energy is going into making light more efficiently with LEDs, whereas with the old incandescent ones, I'm getting on my heat side of things, the incandescent ones used 100 watts of energy, which produced heat and light. So the LED ones are more efficient because they produce more light for the energy going in. What have we got? Nigel says, I have some Sunblaster T5 tube lights, and they are like an electric fire. Again, yeah. Are they the old fluorescent ones, the T5s? Are they fluorescent or LEDs? My LEDs don't get hot, barely warm to the touch. Yep. Bonnie, hi. I visited my plot for the first time in 3 weeks. How was it? How was it there when you visited? There we go. A lot of big LEDs are dimmable. Yeah. And Stuart says, I have 2 hydro pods for my soft herbs. They work really well. Yeah, definitely. Chili Kate, hi everyone. Happy New Year. We're listening while peeling veg, and then we'll be planting chilies, peppers, and aubergines. Perfect timing. Perfect timing. Exactly what we're talking about. Ian says, I'm not sewing anything now. I'm eating chocolate. Oh, excellent. I have 2 tubes left. Kept breaking them, and they cost a fortune to replace. Spider Farmer all around for now. All my lights are dimmable. Absolutely. Like I said, I do have grow lights. I like the LED grow lights. I won't have anything but LED lights in anything I do, to be honest with you, these days. All my house lights, my outdoor lights, my studio light, my Christmas light, everything has to be LED because they are much more efficient at turning electricity into light. So that's where we are. That's my stance on that. So what was I going to say? Like I said, many gardeners, and you see it every year, are itching to sow seeds right now. And you often see people saying, what can I sow now? The trouble is, and I think this is something that we often overlook, is it also depends on where you are in the country. So if we were asking this right now in Australia, we would have a huge amount of seeds that we could sow. But here in the UK, I do think it is still too cold for most seeds. And I say that as somebody that does grow a lot of plants from seed. I love growing plants from seed. We want to sow lots of them. So I'll come back to the original question. Is it too early to sow seeds? Let's answer that question. Is it too early to sow seeds? And my answer for that would be, it depends on what seeds you're sowing and what tools you have available. Bonnie says, my friends kept the greenhouse watered and above freezing, switching on the greenhouse heater. Oh, how lovely. How lovely. Is it a paraffin greenhouse heater on an allotment? I'm guessing it must be. Dig well, just as well with the police helicopters. What have we got? There we got. Thumbs up, everyone, says Nicola. Yeah, please do give us a thumbs up and all that jazz. Scott says, Spider Farmer have a heat sink. Someone should design one where that heat sink acts as a heat mat, if that's possible. You could use the top, but then you would have no light. But then you have no light and it would save energy. So what you're talking about is reclaiming that heat from the heat sink and moving it down to the bottom where the plants are. Could it be done? Could it be done? The only way I think that could be done is to use the heat sink is put it in a container, put the plant at the bottom of the container with the lights at the top, and that heat sink is trapped. The heat is going to be trapped inside, especially if you insulate the top. That's going to cause a convection current inside the container as well, which would also help heat up that area. It could be done. It could be done, but you've got to be careful that the lights don't get too hot at the same time. I can picture it in my head. I can picture it in my head. Bonnie says too early due to length of daylight. Leafy Keith, it's never too early, just sow the right seeds. Now that is actually something I do agree with. My stance on that is it's about sowing the right seeds at the right time. I think, especially us veg gardeners, we often think, oh, we got sow seeds. We think of the classics, the tomatoes, the peppers, the beans and peas. The thing is, if we were sowing, let's go for something we could sow right now, celery. We could sow that right now. That's probably a plant that's well worth sowing at this time of year. What do you think? Is it worth sowing celery now? Or is there a seed that you think definitely would benefit from being sown now? My seeds germinate in a south-facing window. The zippy is south-facing with a brick wall behind it, so maximum light and warmth. Absolutely. Turbo Stream says it's too early. Paraffin heater, says Bonnie. Digros says, I use a Spider Farm low heat to advantages as it reduces the heat mat or Vitapod settings. Interesting. Bally Ceiling says, most things I'd say too early. Yes, again, agree with that. But I sow small amounts of open and old packets just to test germination. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good trick. That's actually something I'm experimenting a bit more. I've been saving more of my own seed. So I've been testing the seed by just getting it on in a container like that with some tissue on the bottom, damp tissue. I'll put a few seeds on it and see if they start to sprout. So just to test the viability of those seeds. Works very well again. Jenny says, whoops, warmth and shelter. I'm sowing now, but not huge numbers. Yeah. Jenny says, the milk bottles are placed on my pallets in self-facing garden. They don't get any protection. You're very lucky there, Jenny, I've got to say, because milk bottles, being that they're not clear, reduce a lot of the light as well. So you're obviously doing something very right there. Scott says, yes, that. I think talking about my idea of using the heat. Yeah, that's the only way I can think of it. Scott says, some of the Mars Hydro LEDs have a unit where the casing has a flat top. This will hold a few seed trays for bottom heat. There you go. But that light isn't above the seeds on top, are they? Does that make sense? Yeah, I get what you're saying. Rob says, I will be sowing peppers, leeks, and thinking about a lot of my flower seeds very soon. Leeks, that's actually saying I do often sow in January in small amounts just to get some early leeks. But I do mine. I've got a polystyrene box that I've basically it was used for fish merchants. And this polystyrene box, I fill it up with, or half fill it up with compost, scatter a few leek seeds on top, place a piece of perspex over the top and place that in the greenhouse. Germination is slow. It can take a couple of weeks before it germinates. But once it does germinate and it's off, we do get some pretty good leeks from it very, very early, which gives us a opportunity to grow big leeks at the same time. Scott says, I thought the question would get your engineer brain going, of course, especially when it comes to heat. There's something I do know something about is when it is heat and all the transfer methods and things like that. I'm gearing up to go back to work tomorrow because it's all back into it. Bonnie says, since I've been away, 2 huge bay trees have been chopped down, so very large stumps left. Can I grow mushrooms in them? That I can't answer. I've got a mushroom allergy, so I don't know. But there is a mushroom farmer, 2 girls, I can't think of their name, who might have the answers for you. Digwell says, sparrows peck at my milk bottles to drink the cream. Oops, a 40-year-old nostalgia thing. Oh, I do miss the old milkman. The proper glass bottles with that foil. Those were the days, weren't they? Turbo Stream, it's too early for Easter eggs in the shops. Agreed. Nigel, diesel heater for me in my greenhouse garden. Bluetooth so I can turn it on and off from the house. Guess what I got for Christmas? A diesel heater with a Bluetooth function so I can operate it from my house as well. I've yet to set it up and pipe the heat into my greenhouse, but that is the plan. That is the plan. What have we got? Digwell, I remember those days. Not funny. Tesco sell milk, eggs, and flour all year round, and pancake days ages away. Excellent. I remember the blue tits doing that as well. Kate says, I've sown sweet peas. Brilliant. And Turbo Stream says, I remember the clank of the milkman early doors on as he delivered milk. Absolutely. So what are we sowing at the moment? Let me share with you the list of things that I am sowing at the moment that I think we would get away with. So on my kitchen windowsill, I'll be sowing herbs, chives, parsley, coriander, things like that. They're indoors. They're going to only small pots. They're going to get an early start. They're going to give us a bit of early herbage. Is that the right word? Herbage. It is now. Just to get things going, just to get things off to an early start. Winter lettuce. I tend to do that in the veggie pod with the greenhouse cover over the top. Again, just to get some early lettuce going into spring, get those salads coming in so that I'm trying to lose weight. Those Christmas blues, Christmas mince pies have piled on. So I'm back on the salads, and that's going to make a big difference. What else have we got? Asparagus and rhubarb I've written down as well. Again, I will sow those. They do need a bit of heat to get going, but the perennials, things like asparagus, rhubarb, cardoons, globe artichokes, I find they can be sown in January, do need heat to get them started, but once they're growing, they can actually, a bit of protection still, but they can get going quite well. And best of all, there's something a bit unusual to sow. Whoever thinks of sowing rhubarb from seed? Yes, I have done it for the last few years. I love growing rhubarb from seed. It's possibly one of my most favorite things to sow in January. And same as asparagus at the same time. It's just they're both so easy to grow from seed that I just sort of think, yeah, I've got to keep doing it. Nicola, I've sown sweet peas 2K, also crimson broad beans. Broad beans are another one we could sow, actually. Again, I think they would need a bit of protection, but again, another one we could sow. Over on Instagram, Lobman Cooks has joined. Lovely to see you. Hope you are well, my friend. Hope to catch up with you soon. Press event in 6 weeks' time, maybe a bit more than that. The milkman round our way comes around at 3 o'clock in the morning. Too early. The stumps will grow back. How do I stop the stumps? Copper nails. Pull a Dalek compost bin over the stumps to block out any light and use it fill it up with compost bin. Try that. Lorraine and Jodie Cady, that's it, the Cady brothers. They're so knowledgeable and have a great book. That's it, the Cady brothers, who I was thinking about when it came to mushrooms. They are the people to ask. They are the people to ask. Ian says, drill holes in the top of the stump and pour weed killer in it, or let it grow some leaves and spray them. I killed a stump by lighting a small fire on top and kept doing it over a few days. Blimey, okay. Ian says, it burnt the root out. You can see this on YouTube. GPE, 17th of February. Yeah, looking forward to it. You go, Nigel, as well. We've got to have a proper meet-up at one of these events. It's always such a blur. We need to have a proper meet-up, perhaps afterwards or before. What have we got? Crab89 says on Instagram, I planted 3 rhubarb plants last year and had a great harvest. However, the one that is in the only place I can force grow hasn't came back up yet. I bought a rhubarb forced, but now can't find it. LOL. So if it's been forced, when you force a rhubarb, it takes a lot of the energy out. So it is possible, if you're trying to force it 2 years running, it's going to struggle. Generally, you would force a rhubarb, harvest it, then you leave it for the rest of the year to recover. Don't harvest anything off it. And once it's recovered, then you're safe to use it the following year. Lomon Cooks, hello, darling. Just popping on quickly. Yes, GPE. Looking forward to it already. On a quick note, broad beans inside at the moment need 5 degrees C to germinate. Sweet peas, chilies, aubergines, peppers, and celery inside on heat mat. Again, I don't disagree with any of that at all. Don't disagree. They do need heat to germinate. But one of the things I always say, don't forget about the light. Light levels are probably more important in some ways than heat. Jenny says, very welcome, Bonnie. Scott, as long as the wood isn't toxic, should be okay for mushrooms, but would need to be a log and not in the ground, I think. GPE, I'll be there. I'm not going to sing it, but yeah. I'm growing mushrooms in books this year. Bit of fun. Good luck. Let me know how you get on with that. I'd love to be able to grow mushrooms. But with my mushroom allergy, it's just not worth it. Crab says, I brought a forcer. Right, with you. He brought a forcer for his rhubarb. Put it over now. It's too early for the rhubarb to start to germinate or start to show itself. Put it over now where you think the crown is, and it'll probably bring it on and start forcing it. I'm going to pop mine over next weekend. I have a mushroom growing book. A lot of dig well. Right, it is. I'm going to quickly gather my thoughts. So let's stick with this conversation and go to this week's mission, which this week you set me the mission to sow anything that I wouldn't normally sow at this time of year. Okay, this week's mission is to sow seeds that I would not normally sow at this time of year. We've got quite a few to do. Let's get on with it. So I set myself up with one of my plug plant starters. I filled up with seed sowing compost, a bit of perlite mixed in there as well, though you can't see the perlite very well. So I've collected a few seeds that I probably would not normally sow at this time of year, and that's usually because they get too big too quick. And the first seed that I'm sowing that definitely would fall into that category, like I said, you set me this challenge, not the other way around, is courgette, a variety called Atina. So in goes my label, which will go right there, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know why I'm doing so many, but this is what you have set me to do. Next we have red Brussels sprouts. Now this is actually something you could consider sowing at this time of year, in my opinion. Not something I would usually sow just yet, but it's certainly something we could sow. And very, very tiny seeds. Let me find my dibber. I'll tell you what I do, I use this as a dibber. I'll just make a hole in all of these and drop. I'm going to try and drop a single seed, but the seeds really are tiny on these. If they germinate, great. We might actually get away with these, I don't know. We'll have to report back in the future. 5 of those again. We'll put the rest to one side. Next, charred bright lights. Now this might be one you could potentially sow at this time of year, but it's not one I would think of sowing at this time of year, but the jury is out on this one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, label in, drop that seed in there, and in there, and in there, in there, and in there. There we go, as easy as that. Now, 2 more seeds to sow today. Next one is one I always use as an example of something I would never sow at this time of year. Tomato, and this is a variety called Tigerella. Reason I never sow tomatoes in January, you can, but because they get so big, by the time they actually need to go somewhere, unless you've got a heated greenhouse, they take up a lot of space and they can get very, very stunted quite easily. Difference being, if you've got a heated propagator, which I do have, and grow lights, which these will be under, we could get away with it. It's just the fact that by about March, these could be pretty tall. They could be sort of 3-4 foot tall, and then you've got to struggle to find somewhere to pot them. And then finally, my final one is cucumber Beth Alpha. This was actually one that was specifically suggested to try and sow at this time of year. Again, 5 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're just going to push those in a little bit more. And make sure that they are all covered. So there we go. That is 5 seeds that I would not normally sow at this time of year that I have sown. Let me know what seeds you are sowing at the moment yourselves. And it's back to the studio. But is that mission accomplished or mission failed? Indeed, is that mission accomplished or mission failed? As I said, the mission that you guys out there set me, I think this was Nicola who said this, is to sow seeds that I would not normally sow at this time of year. All 5 of those I would definitely not normally sow, particularly courgettes. I mean, they are just ridiculous to sow at this time of year, but you know, I'm not one to shirk away from a challenge. I was watching on Instagram, Allotment Cooks is coming up with her commentary through it. And oh my God, courgettes, sprouts okay, chard possibly, tomatoes, so much space needed, cucumbers, maybe forgive loofahs. Got to sow some loofahs actually this year. Yeah, again, don't disagree with anything. I would not normally sow any of those at this time of year at all. Digwell says, not using a Lord Charles tray. No, I've got 2 of those and they're both used up at the moment with my onions. So no, not using a Lord Charles tray. Excuse me, sorry. I might invest in more in the future. I'm still debating whether it's worth it or not. Excuse me. Jenny says, I forgot to say, I have a tray with tiny cells. I think they're 1 centimetre wide and 1.5 centimetre deep. I use them to germinate, too easy to warm in the sun, and it doesn't get too wet and cold. Excuse me, sorry. I've got something stuck in my throat now. This is going to be fun. Right. Let's see if we can get back to normal. Yeah, I got some of those really small seed trays. Oh, God, I hate it when this happens. The joys of live streaming. Lauren Kirk says she was only popping on and now she's crying. No, it's that bad, is it? It's that bad that I've made her cry. Sorry, Jenny. So, yeah, well, I've got some of those really small seed trays as well. They don't take long to fill up at all. Not long at all. If you grow rhubarbs from seed, can you harvest it in the same year? If you start it early enough, yes, you can. If you start it rhubarb seed early enough, yes, you can harvest it in the same year. You've just got to be selective about what you're harvesting, but yes, you can. Thumbs up. Nigel says, Richard, can you give us a video update each week of the seeds you have sown? This will help people who are undecided if to sow yet. Yeah, I will do. I will do. It's the same as the seeds you got me to sow in the hydroponics as well. I haven't shown you an update on that lately, but we've got some action on that, which I'll remember for next week. Jenny, I then pop them out and pop them on when ready. Excellent. My tomatoes were far too leggy when I started them at home in January. Yep, exactly what I've say. Obviously, I do have an advantage with grow lights, but then they get too big. So, as I said, tomatoes will wait until probably end of February before I sow any. Digwell, good ideas. I tend to be a month or two behind. Digwell, I use those trays for flower seeds. Cough it up, son. I only use upcycled plastic containers, milk cartons to sow seeds in. So I used to use sort of seed trays that are a bit smaller than these type containers. But I actually have used less compost by using plug plant starters. So I'm sticking with plug plant starters because it uses less compost and there's less waste because the compost stays as the plug plant with the plant as we pot it on. So I've moved away from that for that very reason. Just thought I'd share that anyway. Digwell needs to go and wash his face because I coughed all over him. I don't know if anybody else has had it, this horrible cold that's been going around this week. I woke up on, what was it, Tuesday, I think it was, yeah, Tuesday, and I felt my throat was really, really sore. And then the following day, couldn't get out of bed for a couple of days. And then Amanda caught it as well, so she suffered as well. So, yes, excellent. Passed it on to her. Jenny says, I harvested rhubarb in the first year last year. It was a monster grown in my jungle patio. Exactly. I love growing rhubarb from seed. I really do. Do you like them, Digwell? I love them. Lucky burst eardrums with the headphones on. Sorry. I haven't got the equalizer on this. I was fiddling around with the settings the other day. That might help if I turn that up. So get them free from my local nursery. Talk about these really tiny plug plants. Ian says, Richard, do you bring some water into your studio? Be worth having some every time. Well, I always have a cup of coffee. But I drank it a bit too quick and forgot about it. Digwell, speak up, mate. Can't hear you. Oh, that was good, Digwell. I had to buy mine. Rude. I've had the vomiting bug. It's not pleasant. It's not pleasant, is it? Scott says, thank God for that. I was about to jump into the TV and give you the old Heimlich maneuver. It did feel a bit like that. It was getting a bit dangerous there. If I could get more, do you want a price to post? Oh, yeah. I also use them for my flower seeds. Still not sure about them yet. I've got to find some. I've got to find them myself. I've got a few, but I've got to find someone that sells them. Again, I like plug plants. This feels like a good opportunity to actually talk about our seed sowing techniques. Allotment Cook says no such thing as behind, to be honest. It all catches up. But when it comes to seed sowing, as I said, I do pretty much sow everything now in plug plants trays, just purely because I found that it saves a lot more compost than using a seed tray, which surprised me, really did surprise me. But more importantly, there was less waste. So a tray, you sow seeds in a seed tray. I'm going to use that as the example. Sow seeds in there. You think it's going to, didn't mean to do that. You think you're going to use all that compost. You sow your seeds in it. You prick out your seeds. And then you find that you've got all that seed compost left behind. Now, you could reuse it, but then you risk contamination. So I don't bother. I tend to throw it all away. Then when I started using plug plants, I noticed that the amount of seed compost that I was buying in was reduced by about 3/4. So I used to buy, let's say, 4 bags of compost a year. It reduced down to 1 bag of compost just by using plug plant trainers. So I'm sticking with that. I generally sow everything in plug plants. There's very few things I sow direct. The exceptions being carrots, parsnips, radishes, anything that you might think, any of the root vegetables, really. Right, where were we? Ian says 3 weeks of a streaming cold before Christmas. There's a lot of it going around at the moment. I went to IKEA on Monday, and that's where I think I caught our cold from. Rob says, I seem to have a problem keeping them moist and not too wet. Oh, talking about those seed things. What have we got? Nigel, Richard brings a whole new meaning to live streaming. Yeah, it happens sometimes. It does happen. We do our best, though. We do our best. Right. Kate says, I loved sowing rhubarb for the first time last year. Had no idea it was so easy. This is what I mean. It is surprising how easy it is to sow rhubarb from seed. Honestly, I feel like I'm over-exaggerating it, but it surprised me just how easy it was. Bottom watering. That's a very important thing, actually. Again, with seeds, I place my seed trays in a tray of water and let the water soak up from the bottom as opposed to other way round. Very important point there. I always bottom water, but it always seems to get too wet. Interesting. Well, we got Digwell says, my seeds rhubarb are nearly as big as the small crowns. My seed rhubarbs are nearly as big as the small crowns I brought harvested this year. Absolutely. I'm just amazed how easy it is to grow rhubarb, and for that matter, asparagus as well, from seed. How easy it is to get some good plants, pretty cheap as well, from seed. And that generally, rhubarb and asparagus, you would buy the whole plant from garden centre. How many of you have ever grown seeds or grown rhubarb or asparagus from seed? I'm going to throw that out there as a question. Perfect for sowing at this time of year. Now, I'm going to go into Richard rants or raves. I haven't had the chance to really work on our little stings to go from these things, these different sections. But rants or raves. I'm going to rave this week, and this rave is probably going to be something that you're going to rant about. But I'm going to rave because of the fact that we have had a frost, and a good hard frost. It's very, very cold. Now, why am I so pleased about that? One, we need it. I think it helps the soil. I do believe a good frost on the soil breaks down that top surface. We very rarely get some frost here. That's why it's so important to me, or why I'm so pleased about it. It helps break down that soil into a fine tilth. But also it kills a lot of the bugs that are overwintering in the bad bugs, that is, overwintering in the soil as well, which means less slugs and snails next year, things like that. So That's why I'm quite happy, quite pleased to have a frost. Added to that, there's nothing quite like going out in the garden when it's covered in frost and just seeing this white stuff everywhere. I mean, we don't get snow here. We very rarely get snow here. So to get a frost is the closest we really get. This week has actually only been we did have a frost at the beginning of December, but not a hard frost at all. This week has been the first time we've really had a decent frost as well. So I'm rather pleased. I'm rather pleased about that. What's made you happy? What has made you upset this week? Bonnie says, I managed to source 8 giant black Russian tomato seeds, so I'm nervous about germination as they were so hard to find. Yeah, I would wait until at least the end of February, March before sowing those. And then see how you get on. Don't forget to post photos in our Facebook group. Putin has them all. Bonnie says, the freeze should have split our garlic cloves, hopefully. Garlic just needs to be below 10 degrees C for a week to split the cloves. It doesn't need a freeze as such. It's below 10 degrees to get that split. But it will work. It will help. Stuart says, I've sown rhubarb from seed the last 2 years. 10 sold most of the plants. 10 sold most of the plants, planning to do the same this year. Excellent, excellent. As long as you fermented them, they will be okay. Talking about the Russian seeds, the tomato seeds there. Turbo Stream says, if it would be odd if we didn't get frosts here. It's amazing the difference whether it's just 100 miles north of Littlehampton. One of the things you've got to remember with where I live is I am a 10-minute walk from the sea. So the sea is obviously, it's a thermal battery. We're getting into this heat conversation again, aren't we? The sea generally isn't as cold as the air around here. There's not much difference in it, but it has a bit of an effect because I live so close to the coast. It warms the air up in the winter, or it warms the ground up in the winter. But in the summer, it also cools the air down. So we don't really get baking hot summers either here because of sea. So that's the real big difference. It's not so much where you or how much further north you are. It's because I'm so close to the sea that I get this weird climate. Nigel has a rant. Easter eggs already in supermarkets. Rave, looks like Waitrose is closing in my local Dobby's Garden Centre. Whose idea was it to put a Waitrose in a garden? I mean, is it a sign of the times that garden centres need to get people coming in to do their groceries and might buy a plant at the same time? I don't know. But yeah, I'm with you. I've got to go. I haven't been to a Dobby's. Must be nearly a year now since I've been into a Dobby's. So hard. How your life changes when you're not on the road. Jenny says, we've been frozen solid since Thursday night. No, we haven't been frozen solid, but we've had a bit of a cold. Rave, my local Dobby's closed. Oh, that's a shame. That is a shame. I used to like the Dobby's that I visited. I used to like visiting them. They were good garden centres, except for the Waitrose. We had freezing fog in Hove, says Bonnie. Turbo Extreme says, our snow this year came from the northwest through the Cheshire Gap between the North Wales and the Pennines. I've got some photos coming up in a bit. We've got a lot of photos this week, actually, showing just that. I've been told Waitrose are moving out of all Dobbies. That'll be interesting. Hargrave, I didn't sow rhubarb until I got them in the Veg Ground podcast membership. Amazed how easy, and now plan to do again. Exactly. That's why I include them, because it is amazing just how easy it is to sow rhubarb. I know I keep going on about that tonight, but it just blows my mind how easy it is. Stuart says, I'm hoping that the Supporters Club will have rhubarb seeds this year. Yep, they do. Supermarket and garden centre is so they can stay open in pandemic. That's a good point. What have we got? But yeah. Jenny says, Rave, I went to a local nursery yesterday and treated myself to a coffee. As a member, I got a free coffee, so it tasted even better. Lovely, lovely. Yeah, yeah. Isn't it a sad when you have to go to a garden centre to get a coffee, though, isn't it? One of the conversations I've had with some people is that they don't like that some people say when they go to a garden centre, it's a great garden centre because of the calf. The garden centre should be a great garden centre because of the garden centre, in my eyes. Digger says Dobby died when he was killed by Bellatrix the Stranger's knife while rescuing Harry Potter. Excellent, excellent. Rob says his snow came from the sky. Turbo Stream, no Dobbies near me, nor a Waitrose. We have an M and S, though. Mind you, most supermarkets are selling stuff that you would find in a garden centre as well. Morrison seemed to have a huge garden centre as you walk in, or our one does anyway, like a plant stand and flower selling plants and garden items. Not very good, admittedly, but it's there. It's there. Bonnie is 5 minutes walk away from Lidl, Aldi, and Waitrose. They're all there. They're all there. What else do we need to do? We'll come to the next thing in just a moment. Has anybody else got anything that has been a positive or negative this week? I'm going to say this is quite a good feature. I think we definitely got to ask you guys for your input more on this because it brings it all together. Digler says, all of my local private garden centres have a club. Loads of offers on it, including free coffee, etc. Yeah, I'm noticing this a lot more as well. A lot of garden centres have a club, which is great. But it's not just the small family-run ones. It's the bigger chains as well. And I was going to say, I used to go in pretty much every garden centre I came across. Now I'm not on the road. I could probably be loyal to just one garden centre. But my garden centre that's closest to me is not by far one that I am a big fan of. They're overpriced and they don't cater for everything that we need. Go a bit further, we've got a family-run garden centre, which I find does better. I'd much rather go there, in my opinion. Jenny says, plant seeds, equipment, and cafe perfect all year round. A great local nursery. Clever, you walk past the plants to the calf. Yeah, good point. Good point. That might be a question that we can ask for next week. What makes a good garden centre? Would that be a good question for next week? What do you think on that? Stuart says, my local garden centre has been taken over by a real gardener. Whoop, whoop. It has changed to a plant nursery. Win, win. Excellent, excellent. Most supermarkets have plant trolleys full of dead plants low through lack of water. Supermarkets, same as like the Range as well, B&M, they have these trays of dead plants quite often when they're just not being looked after as well as they could be. Wilco's were going the same way as well. They weren't looking after their plants anywhere near as good as they used to. So, yeah. I think that says a lot about the garden centres, doesn't it? They do care for their plants. I'm nearer the chipping than the food shops, says Turbo Stream. Does that include butchers? Rob says, some of the best flower plants I've ever got from Aldi. Yeah. Again, I've got to admit, Lidl and Aldi, they do seem to do something a bit different, but I think that's because they turn them around quite quick. So they're never on the shop for more than a few days. But I could be wrong on that. My rent, other allotment owners, what's gone on there? In fact, I know a few people who are going to say that as well. Turbo Stream says, Aldi plants are all dead through lack of water. Okay, that goes against what I just said. Jenny says, I hardly ever go into a garden centre. I tend to go into local nurseries. Yeah, with you on that. The trouble with local nurseries is they're often hidden. They're not as well seen as the garden centres. Stuart says, this week's positive is I planted all my bulbs last night. Brilliant, brilliant. Digwell says, Rob had some great blueberry bushes from Lidl last year. Excellent. Nigel, Dobby's is £12 per year, which includes 2 hot drinks per month and 10% off plant and seeds. That kind of makes it worthwhile, isn't it? £12 per year, 2 hot drinks, it pays for itself. Nicola, I had a positive this week. January shopping at second-hand commercial polytunnel frame. Will need a new skin, and I want crop bars. Yeah, so funny enough, there's been a lot of positive stuff going on this year already. I think 2025, a lot of people, especially towards the end, and I know some of you fall into this category, were feeling a little bit lost, a little bit like your mojo, your enthusiasm had waned. I have to admit, I was in a similar boat myself. I was struggling with enthusiasm a bit to a certain extent. But 2026, I'm seeing a lot of people are turning around and saying, let's be positive. We can do this. We can do that. So everyone's moving forward. It's great to see. And power to you. Let's do it. Scott says, I find I have to visit 3 different garden centres just to get a few things that I want that are mostly gift shops now. Yeah. We'll talk about garden centres next week. What makes a good garden centre? No rave around. I've hardly been outside since Christmas Day. I avoid shops at this time of year, probably why I avoid the lurgy. I think Aldi and Lidl are on the same par for plants. And Nicholas says 6 new chooks today after losing so many to the fox last year. Yeah. Nicholas says Aldi, Lidl don't care. They don't look after the plants. They get full credit for any returns, whatever the condition. Interesting. Nigel says, my local Lidl stopped selling plants. The whole trolley got wheeled away a few times. Oh, interesting. Badgers are the biggest predator to chooks around here. Bad because they get through wire mesh and netting. Yeah, badgers. They're cute things, but they're nasty things as well. Rob says, we had a great little nursery just down the road, but they closed down. Would not have a calf on site, so a lot of people drove 5 miles to one that had a calf. Interesting. But he says, I get all my lavender plants from Lidl, special offer for 36 plants. I don't pay membership. It is like a supermarket rewards card. You collect points, a free hot drink per month, spend so much, and they plant a tree in the land. Lots of expert advice, newsletter, etc. Excellent. Stuart says, this year I am only buying from independent garden centres as the advice is always better. And dig well, wear a face mask, no lurgy. Right, I am going to now show up another video. It's this week's Cookalong, which is, it was Digwell's suggestion, Chinese tea eggs. Well, hello and welcome back to the kitchen. This week I am cooking Chinese tea eggs, as suggested by Mr. Digwell Green Fingers. Let me show you what we got. So we got a collection of ingredients here. Obviously we have got the eggs, which are over here. I've got 4 of them. Got some ginger that I've been chopping. I've got a tea bag. Not sure if tea is quite the right thing, or a tea bag like that, but it's what I'm using. Cinnamon stick, some peppercorns, soy sauce, and some rice wine vinegar. So let's make it. So first things first is we are going to make the marinade. So I've got a pan of hot water I've been boiling. We're going to add in the tea bag. Going to add in the cinnamon stick. We're going to add in the ginger. And we're going to add in the peppercorn. A few more of those. We could of course also add Chinese 5 spice and other ingredients should we want as well. Soy sauce. Quite a bit of that. I'm going to turn the heat up, bring it up, back up to a boil, and then rice wine vinegar. And then once that comes up to a boil, we'll then simmer it for about 10 minutes. And then we turn it off the heat and allow it to cool. In the meantime, let's boil the eggs. Now I'm sure most of you know how to boil eggs. We're going to boil them for about 7 minutes so we get them fairly nice and hard boiled. These are eggs from my chickens. I'm putting them in quite carefully because what I don't want is for them to crack at this stage. But we'll boil them for 7 minutes, then we'll get them straight into an ice bath and cooled down quite rapidly. There we go. That's everything on the go. Now I do want to say I've never cooked this before, so I've got no idea how it's going to turn out, but it's exciting nonetheless. So the next stage of this, the eggs have been cooked and they've been placed in an ice water bath to stop them from cooking. So we just want to crack them slightly. Like so. Try and leave the shells on. We could take the shells off, of course, but from what I've seen, I think they look better with the shells on. It's a bit of an experiment, like I say. Love these beautiful blue eggs, just look gorgeous. Last one. There we go. So now we take these eggs and we place them inside this marinade. I'm hoping we've got enough here to cover them all over, which I think we just about have. Just. Now, we're going to leave this to marinate for about 24 hours and then we'll come back and see how they look. Okay, so the eggs have been in that marinade for 24 hours and I can tell you now, I think this was probably the blue one. The colour, it's just completely lost that beautiful blue colour. But that could be a good sign because it's kind of what we want. What we're hoping, we peel the eggs. Yeah, you can see it. The sort of oak in it, the egg itself has taken on the colour of the marinade. Oh. Well, he says it's quite hard to do this with fresh eggs. Okay, well now as you can see the eggs are completely peeled. We've got a bit of discolouring going on where the tea has soaked into the eggs. What I realised is that the membrane you get between the shell and the egg, because my chicken eggs are fresh, I keep my own chickens, it can be very difficult to separate the two easily. So the actual membrane that took on most of that colour is has been lost, but we can still see there is a bit of marbling going on. So it has done what it's meant to do. What does it taste like? One way to find out. Doesn't really taste of anything other than egg, in all honesty. Let's try a bit of yolk, because that does look like it's taken on quite a bit of the colouring. If we look at that. Tastes just like egg, I'm afraid. I can't say there's anything to really sing home about there. Well, back to the studio. Indeed, back to the studio, and as I say, you can see on these three remaining that there is quite a bit of marbling. The tea is obviously soaked in and done what it was meant to do. But I thought what we would do quickly is I'm going to try this one. It has obviously taken on quite a bit of the tea, quite a bit of a colour. It just tastes like egg. Honestly, it just tastes like egg. I was expecting it to have some of that marinade taken on, but I can't say it has. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe it's because I'm using the fresh eggs instead of supermarket eggs that it's just not penetrating. I don't know, but I may have done something wrong. That's all I'm going to say. My chucks have a good night area with wire mesh and then pavers as kernel. Basic badgers are going to struggle to get in. Jamie says plant fairs are by far the best place to buy plants. Good point. Good point. I can't think of any plant fairs coming up anytime soon, but there will be. Turbo Stream says I took a decent dose of vitamin D every winter. It seemed to work. Does Jack Daniels contain vitamin D? It must do. It must do. It's got apples in it, hasn't it? Appleton rum does. Always peel an egg using a teaspoon. That's not the way I did it on when I was a chef. We cracked and rolled to get the eggshells off. That's how we did it. Stuart Jackson says, is this on the website, Richard? My son is asking. Thank you. Not until I've got it right. Not until I've got it right. It's Chinese tea eggs. You can find it by searching online, but it needs a bit of practice. It needs a bit of practice till I get it right. Digwa says, nice job. The more you crack, the more cracks you make, the better the marbling. And use 8 tea bags. Perhaps I didn't make it strong enough. Perhaps I didn't make it strong enough. Stuart says, would have gone better if you had removed the shells before. Well, that is one option. If I'd removed the entire shells, it may have tasted more of the marinade. But the entire egg would then be black instead of that marbling. And traditionally, it would be just the cracked shells to get the marbling in. So a bit of it interesting. Bonnie says the flavour was all in the shell. Again, this is a Chinese recipe, so you kind of think it would work. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it, would they? I'll post my recipe on the Facebook group, Show Winners. Yeah, please do. Please do. How far off would I? Stuart says your eggs would have had harder shells. It could be that. It's a good point. But then I come back to, if it's a Chinese recipe, they keep chickens themselves, so it would have worked there. Scott says I pop these on at work as a garnish for things like chicken katsu, but with soft boiled eggs. But we can sell 150 portions, probably why the team hate me sometimes. Absolutely, absolutely. It does not matter. It's all about the cracks. Yeah. I think it was the membrane more than anything, because the shell itself cracked, but that membrane between the shell and the actual egg, that was quite solid. And I think that's where it didn't go in. And because, as I say, my eggs are fresh, they're less than a week old, that membrane hasn't gone down. You don't really get that with supermarket eggs because they're not as fresh. Anyway, you get the idea. Let's quickly have a look at your photos. I'm going to have to finish the rest of this egg as well. I've just got a bit of it on that, a bit of flavour to that one. So your photos now, Adrian Turbo Stream, he shared this photo of his allotment covered in snow. That is a lot of snow, to say the least. Gary has also shared his plot shot, which looks fantastic. I think this is down in Devon way, if I'm not mistaken. Looks fantastic. Yeah, it looks fantastic. That's all I can say. Gary's also made this hazel fence, which again, good effort coming in from there. You know, I love using hazel on my allotment. That's why I have a hazel tree. So seeing this hazel fence really is a good thing. I love it. I love it a lot. Now, Scott also shared his plot shot. Now, Scott has had a bit of a setback last year. I won't go into the details because that's up to Scott, but I think he's now got his mojo back. He's ready to hit the allotment hard and get growing to make himself happy. Nicola, spelled that wrong here, Bicola. She's also found this bargain. She's also got a mojo back, which is something that, as I said earlier, seems to be making people happy at the moment. The change of the year, people seem inspired. My plot shot. This is me, my allotment. I took a shot of my allotment. My allotment is obviously 2 plots. You got the one at the front and one at the back, including those metal containers, right down to just beyond that green shed at the back. That's my allotment. Ginny's plot shot for January. A lot of people taking their plot shot this week, which I'm really grateful for. Please do keep them. Please do keep them. We want them at the end of the year to pot together to make like we did last week. So please do keep your plot shots. Keep them in a file or something like that, because we love to see them. Steve has also shared his plot shot. This is a digger. This is another Steve. Again, a good looking plot. A lot of compost laid, horse manure and stuff, ready for the growing season. Now, Digwell, he had a delivery and the postman said, "Are you a gardener by any chance?" Books and seed catalogues and Gardeners World live tickets, things like that going on. Looks fantastic, doesn't it? Kate also shared this infographic on whether a glass is half full as the optimist, the glass is half empty as a pessimist, or as a gardener, you can put your plants in the glass. That's the gardener's half full, isn't it? Philly also shared. Sorry, let me say that again. Philly has also shared this plot shot again. This is Northern Ireland, if I'm not mistaken. A lot of snow there as well. It's good to see some snow, though. I've got to say, it is nice to see lots of snow. Now, please do keep sharing your photos. You can post them in our Facebook group, send to me via social media, or email me, richard@theveggroundpodcast.co.uk. richard@theveggroundpodcast.co.uk. So lovely. Thank you. What's happened there? Lovely. Thank you so much for sending your photos in. We really do need to see more of them. And we want more like it. Where are we? Bonnie says, cooking challenge. Make something using produce you stored from the summer. It's a Cookalong. Hashtag Cookalong to be in the competition. Let's see. Yeah, it's not came up. Nicola, mission, make bird feeders from recycled material. We've done bird houses before, so bird feeders could work. Scott says, totally agree with super fresh eggs. Lots of recipes need adapting. Yeah, definitely. That's definitely the case here. Bonnie, cooking challenge, make something using produce. Cookalong, one word. It is in the bottom panel there. Stuart says, I have a hazel fence. I made them with the children. Great way to use the sticks. Yeah, I've never made a hazel fence, but I'm quite tempted to do that at some point. Digwell says, are you going to save all the plot shots to compile at the end of the year? I'm going to, but I'm going to ask if you are sending them in, if you could as well, just to cover all bases. I know that's a lot to ask for you, but it would be great if you could. I will do it myself, but you know what I'm like. Sometimes everything gets on top of me. I'd love to see if you could do it as well. Thumbs up, like, subscribe, etc. Yeah, please do give us a like, a subscribe, a follow, click the notifications so that you know when we go live. Cookalong there we go, that's gone in. I'm not even going to bother doing the draw because we've got one for each. So, Jenny, if you can make a note, use stored preserved things that I grew to make something up with. And the following one was the mission to make a bird feeder out of recycled materials. Nicholas says, another great chat. Indeed, I think we have just about covered everything, and it is exactly 7:30. Hope you have enjoyed the chat tonight. It's been a bit of a struggle because I'm still getting over this cold, but I've really enjoyed chatting to you. Happy New Year again, once and all. Next week, we're going to talk about what makes a garden centre good, what makes you want to go into a garden centre. It's going to be a bit of a lively debate again, I hope. But thanks so much for joining me this week. Hope you've enjoyed it. Please do give us a like, a subscribe, follow, notifications so you know when we go live. We will be back again next Sunday at 6. So until then, please take care. Bye for now.